Let's go ahead and get my webcam started. Well, I'm glad to be here with the Bill of Rights Institute for a live webinar. And what we're going to do here, we're going to be broadcasting every weeknight between now and the exam. And so as far as that goes, let's go ahead and start with the beginning. Now, let me be clear about our objectives here and what we're trying to do. It's going to be nearly impossible to try to review all of the content in the 9 hours that we have together. So I'm going to be picking some specific content. I'm not going to be looking at every single key concept, but I'll be looking at some of them. And then I want to take a deeper look into each one of them. And part of the session, each session that we do, I want to focus on some kind of skill, whether that be an LEQ skill or a document analysis skill or something like that. And then, I'm going to take some questions. So as far as that goes, there may be some questions that you want to ask. So this is going to be the first night, and let's see what we can put together here. So I have got a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to be showing off here. Now, remember as well, we are going to be emailing you materials. You will get emails from the Bill of Rights Institute, and you're going to be getting, basically a summary of what we're doing here. All right. So as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and do session 1 here. Now, my intention here, I'm not going to be following the numbered periods strictly necessarily, because remember that the numbered periods are never specifically mentioned on the exam. But as far as this goes, I'm going to cover colonial America, which aligns with the so-called APUSH period 1 and 2. Now we've got a few people raising their hand. Let's see how this works when somebody raises their hand. Okay, so we're still a little bit of getting to know you on the stuff here. Let's see, Maddie, I might be having a little bit of a problem, with this. Like, let's see. Okay, so I want to make. Okay, so then I can put that right there. Okay, I should be able to expand this a little bit. I still want to see if people have questions. Oh, my video has, oh, okay, got it. Okay, so now I am sharing the video. Okay, and Maddie, just in case you can, if I'm not responsive, I would say that if you want to send me a text, that's always an option too. I'm going to keep my phone here just in case I might kind of lose track of the chat. Okay, and somebody said, please take notes. Now, remember, when you're taking notes, I would advise you to take handwritten notes. They're much more effective than notes taken on a computer. So I would urge you to get your notebook out and actually be writing things down, because we type mindlessly, we write mindfully. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and get started. I think everybody can see everything. You can see me. You can see what I've got here. So let's start off with Key Concept 1.1, Native American Cultures. Now, since we've got a limited amount of time, I'm always going to be directing you to other resources, okay? So we've got things that I've got. Let's see. The session's going to last about an hour. Can people see me now? My video still hasn't started. Okay, so let's see. I need to click start sharing. Okay. All right, so excellent. Okay, so my video has started. Now, of course, you're just kind of looking at my face now. It's not, not really, my face is not going to be on the test, but at least y'all can see me now. It looks a little bit personal, okay? So everything good now? Let's make sure. Okay, well, I hope your dad is an attractive person, JD. Thank you so much, I guess. All right, so as far as that goes, let's start off with Key Concept 1.1, Native American Cultures. All right. And so as far as that goes, yes, and remember everybody, use the chat box for crosstalk amongst yourselves. The question thing should really be for things that you want to bring directly to my attention. Okay, so let's make sure we're distinguishing between the chat between students and teachers who are present, and the question box, which is really something that you are trying to communicate directly with me. And if Maddie, if you could clear that question box, and then that way we can start. We can start. Okay, so y'all can't see the chat box because of what I've done there. Okay, so let me see what I can do here. Okay, so let me just go ahead and put this over here. All right, so y'all can see the chat box now. Okay, so I think that we've got everything that we need here. Let me make that chat box a little bit, okay. So thank y'all for your patience here, as we're just kind of getting to know what we've got here. Okay, so we have got the chat, and you can see what's going on there. And let me go ahead and just make the question box a little bit smaller, and the camera box. And that way, yes, we will be making all of these things available afterwards. You will be getting an email from us, okay? So that's going to have also links to additional resources. Make sure your friends are on the email list, okay? Make sure your friends sign up for these webinars. We've still got room for about 270 people. We're going to have more in here next week than this week. So let's go ahead and get started now that we see everything. I think we've got everything good. So key concept 1.1, Native American cultures. Now, I will make sure that the Bill of Rights Institute has a link to this blog post that I put up some time ago. And this goes into basically a summary of a video that I created on Native American cultures that addresses key concept 1.1. And so a few things that we need to know. I'm going to put this in, very briefly. And of course, you can, look at these materials if you want a more thorough explanation. And so what we see here, first of all, looking at this map, we see that there are different culture groups of Native Americans, that it's not just one single group. They did not share common languages or cultures. They often fought among each other, just like Europeans fought among each other. And, these Native Americans made allies with Europeans. Now, the other thing I want to note here is we see hunting, we see fishing, but we also see farming. There is kind of a stereotype of Native Americans, that people think like, okay, Indians live in teepees and they ride horses and chase buffalo. Now, this would be the Plains Indians who subsisted largely by hunting buffalo. But there were other Indian groups that were also farming. They practiced agriculture. And we want to note here that the environment that they found themselves in made a difference in their cultural practices, and especially their food gathering practices, gender roles, and stuff like that. Okay, so as far as that goes, and Maddie's noted that there is a study guide. There's a blank study guide that you're free to use, provided by the Bill of Rights Institute, if you want to take some notes in an organized fashion. So note here that we've got hunting, farming, fishing, and tribes are doing different things. Now, I've got a graphic organizer that's available on that blog post and in the video lecture if you want to look at the lecture from here. But noting that we've got the Plains Indians, of course, we've got the Arctic Indians, in the Northeast, we see slash and burn agriculture and what they call the Three Sisters. Now, I'm going to be talking briefly about the Columbian Exchange in a bit. But the Three Sisters were squash, corn, and beans. And this is a little bit different than European row agriculture and plowing your fields. This agriculture was typically done by women. You see things about gender on the APUSH history exam, and noting that, for Europeans, for example, that the men tended to work out in the fields, whereas in the American Indian societies, they tended to hunt and gather. They tended to hunt while the women were the ones who planted the crops because it wasn't as labor intensive. So there was, of course, some misunderstandings between the Europeans and the Native Americans on that front. Now, as I noted as well, intertribal warfare, which you want to notice here, that, you see that there is a Europeans are trading, weapons and stuff like that, and they are taking sides in these conflicts. And so as far as that goes, what I want to make sure that as far as a takeaway, okay, a lot of these questions, especially on the multiple choice, are really about, what you're going to be, a lot of the questions on the multiple choice are really about painting things with a broad brush, okay? And yes, exactly. And y'all are noting that some of the stuff here, like key concept, the period one, so-called, it's only 5% of the test. And part of the reason for this webinar is to give you a basic review, also to point you to other resources, and then also to kind of show you how you might tackle things on the exam. All right, so as far as that goes, we want to know that there were diverse and conflicting cultures, okay, that there are diverse interactions with the environment, which include agriculture. That's one thing that I've seen that, they want to make sure that you understand that native societies had moved beyond simply hunting and gathering and that they did practice agriculture. And so, as far as that goes, let's take a quick look at key concept 1.2, and that is the Columbian Exchange. And so the Columbian Exchange, ladies and gentlemen, now I will bring you to the attention. I'm very honored to have the Bill of Rights Institute, partnering with me for this, and they're offering these free webinars. They contracted with me to do this, and I've got a YouTube channel. A lot of y'all probably already know that, but the Bill of Rights Institute also has a YouTube channel, and one of the things that we've got here is, we've got a video on the Columbian Exchange. They've done several videos for APUSH review, and Maddie will be sharing a link to their video on the Columbian Exchange in the materials that she's going to share with you. Okay, so make sure that, not only do I have a YouTube channel, they've got one, you can subscribe to it. Okay, so make sure that you subscribe to that. Joe's Productions, great source, great guy. I really like Joe's, and he's great. He is really clutch for people who are cramming. Okay, so like next week, yeah, I think watching Joe's Productions videos is definitely good stuff. Okay. So the Columbian Exchange, what we want to note about this is that it creates a permanent relationship between Europe and the Americas, and I need to edit that slide. I need to add Africa to that, okay? So it's really this whole thing with Atlantic trade that, Europe, Africa, and the Americas, okay, are trading things with each other, and that there are products that are available in both places that, really, it results in this exchange of goods, the exchange of animals, the exchange of ideas, and of course, the exchange of diseases. And so, as far as crops, now, one thing, you don't want to go over an exhaustive list of the Columbian Exchange. That would be a waste of time, I think. But what you do want to see is you want to look at a few of these things and a few of these, items, and consider maybe having two or three from the old world to the new world, and maybe having two or three from the old new world to the old world, okay? And so, as far as that goes, now I will tell y'all that I'm kind of getting used to this platform. The irrelevant conversation is a bit distracting. Okay, so the chat, if y'all are talking about like things that have nothing to do with APUS history, I would ask, why are you here? So let's consider keeping, just proposing that we try to keep the chat relevant to APUS history. There we go, Aiden. George Washington. Okay, so yeah, but it's okay. I mean, we just need to get used to this software. But when I see, you're here to review for APUS history, and I'm kind of keeping one eye on the chat here. And so when we have like a lot of stuff going on and I'm seeing physics and all that, you're distracting me without cause, and it's not helping you or the people who are here. Okay, so just keep that in mind as far as that goes. Let's try to keep the chat relevant to APUS history. All right, really laggy. Okay, that would be, hopefully that's okay. So Melissa, the triangular trade is what occurs as a result of the Columbian Exchange. Now, the Columbian Exchange is specifically going into these products. So first of all, bananas, sugar, and peaches. They come from the old world to the new world. And what's kind of curious about this is that bananas and sugar and peaches, we associate those with the New World. They grow very well there. Bananas grow very well in Central America. Sugar grows very well in the Caribbean, and peaches grow well in, of course, Georgia. But from what I've heard, now, of course, POV South Carolina, right? I might have some bias here, but I've heard that South Carolina actually grows more peaches than Georgia. Georgia just takes credit for it. So all of these crops come from the Bananas, no, bananas started off in Papua New Guinea, then went to Africa. And see, the thing is, we associate bananas with the Americas. And that's part of what I'm getting at here with the Columbian exchange, is that we associate bananas with the Americas. But the thing is, they didn't come there. Columbus brought not necessarily Columbus himself, but, the Europeans brought bananas over from the old world, okay, specifically from Africa. So as far as that goes, then you look at New World to Old World, tomatoes, corn, and of course tobacco. This is the first time that Europeans are exposed to tobacco, which was very popular among these Indian populations. Then animals. Now you look at horses. Now one thing we want to note about horses, we want to note how they influence the lifestyles of the Plains Indians. So if we go back to what we've got here, and my blog post and video will be linked on the materials that you're sent out later, that if we look at our organizer here, that Plains Indians, they hunted buffalo on horseback, okay? So they were bison hunters. And because of the Columbian exchange, then we're seeing an adaptation of the Indian lifestyle. And so what's important to note too is that there are exchanges going on and that the Indians are contributing to these exchanges. The Indians are not just passive. You've got this narrative that the Indians are, just perpetual victims, but really there are a lot of things that the Europeans are picking up from Native Americans. Now, did I just see a Thomas Richey, Ricci? I need to shout out to that guy, okay? So his name's Tom Richey too. That's pretty awesome. All right, so horses are coming from Europe, and that they are influencing, Indian lifestyles here. And so then turkeys are coming from the New World and going to the Old World. Now, the triangular trade, what that's doing is like basically during the colonial period, you've got Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Okay, so from Europe, you're getting finished goods. Okay, this is mercantilism. If any of you've had AP European history before now, you talked about mercantilism. You should have talked about it in APUSH as well. Now, so basically this triangular trade, the way it works is that Europe produces raw materials. Never mind. Okay. Europe produces finished goods. The colonies produce raw materials. And so the colonies will produce raw materials. They trade with Europe in return for manufactured goods. Europe brings manufactured goods to Africa where they trade for slaves. And then slaves were traded with the New World, and where they were put on plantations mostly in Central and South America with the sugar economy, but at the same time also in North America and in the future United States. And so another thing that's spreading is diseases. Now, this list is much longer on the PowerPoint that I've got it animated, just tons of diseases that the Indians had never experienced before. And this is something that, the diseases took out a lot of Native Americans. It's not like the Europeans necessarily meant to, kind of like in the Vietnam War. The Agent Orange wasn't used in order to create birth defects. The Agent Orange was used in order to get rid of the jungle that Charlie was running into, but it ended up indirectly causing birth defects. Now, there are some diseases, a handful of diseases that are coming from the New World to the Old World, the most notable being syphilis, which is, not a pleasant illness to have, especially then before antibiotics. And so as far as that goes, let's move on to key concept 2.1, European colonizers. All right. So let's see here. Okay, it looks like the chat has been cleared there. All right, well, good. All right, so remember, if you've got a question, yes, remember, ladies and gentlemen, I know we've got people coming and going and that sort of thing, but remember that the Bill of Rights Institute is going to send you something after every webinar with some links to useful information that you can use, okay? So the Bill of Rights Institute's taking care of you. All right. So as far as that, yes, okay, excellent. Yeah, the PowerPoints will be emailed and all that. All right, so diseases from the New World, it's just a handful. It's most of the diseases are coming from Europe to the, the old world to the new world, okay? And that's wiping out a lot of Indian populations. Now, when we look at Key Concept 2.1, now remember, this is not intended to be fully comprehensive, but to focus on some things that are going to help you prepare for the exam. Remember to stay hydrated. Remember, stay active, stay hydrated, keep yourself, in a healthy pattern. Okay. All right. So as far as all of that stuff, let's look at the European colonizers. Now, the European colonizers are. Do you need to know hydration for the exam, Marco? You need to know hydration so that you're ready for the exam. I mean, your brain needs water, so I would say yes. I mean, I'm helping you with the exam. I'm helping you with life. Okay, you don't want to get sick and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so you want to make sure that you stay alive. Very good. You can't take the exam if you're not in good health. All right, so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, stay alive, Marco. I think that should be a trending hashtag on Twitter or something like that. Stay alive, Marco. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's see. At Tom Richey on Twitter, if y'all want to, if y'all want to get in touch with me. Also, the Bill of Rights Institute is on Twitter as well, so make sure to follow them for updates. And I'm sure they're going to be tweeting some of these study guides. Let me make sure that I've got the Bill of Rights Institute's Twitter handle correct. And let's see, let me just, and of course, Maddie can post that as well. But you want to make sure that you're following the Bill of Rights Institute, BR Institute. Okay, so if you want to follow the Bill of Rights Institute on Twitter, be at BR Institute. Okay. And if you want to follow me, just at Tom Richey on Twitter. So yes, excellent. BR Institute, and they'll be tweeting some things that'll be useful for you. So I would recommend following the Bill of Rights Institute. All right, so let's look at the European colonizers. And what we need to do here is we need to think about, you should know the encomienda. There's really nothing on this graphic organizer that will not be useful for you in comparing things. Now, one thing I want to make clear is that for the multiple choice, it's largely based on the concept outline. Now, the multiple choice only makes up 40% of your exam. And so 60% of your exam is based on things that you generate, okay? So 60% of the exam is that they're asking you general questions and you construct the evidence. So, the encomienda is something that would be very, very good for, being able to compare the Spanish with somebody else, okay? So don't think in terms of so much that do I need to know this, but would this be helpful for, writing an essay, okay? Because most of your exam is based on constructed responses. All right, so as far as that sort of thing, oh, okay. That may not. I'm gonna get. Okay, so let me get in here. Okay, so as far as this goes, what I'm gonna do here, and I've got a video on each of these. Okay, so if you go to my YouTube channel, there are videos that cover each of these individually. So depending on what you want to do, I mean, some of y'all, if you're trying to make a 3, watching these webinars may help you get to that. But if you're trying to make a 5, you want to go investigate some other sources that we're going to make available to you. So as far as the European colonizers, first of all, we want to consider, thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. So take away from this. Well, here's the thing, Justin, as far as that goes, good luck with that if you're writing an LEQ, okay? Now, if you're doing the multiple choice, but the thing is, if you only know that they're different, then you may not, you're not going to get LEQ points or anything like that, okay? Now, my YouTube channel, just my name, Tom Richey. If you type that in, if you just type in Tom Richey on YouTube, you can find my channel. Remember, the Bill of Rights Institute also has a YouTube channel that you should subscribe to as well. Now, when we look at the Spanish, okay, so for example, we don't want to just know that the Spanish were different than the French, the Dutch, and the English. We want to know that the Spanish were Catholic, that the Spanish connected, they attracted conquistadors and priests, and their settlements were missions. Now, they sent few colonists, okay? They sent few colonists. And so as far as that, They've got, and they're engaging in evangelism. Now, evangelism, some areas of the country are more religious than others. If you're from the South, like me, you should know what evangelism is. Evangelism is when you're trying to spread your religion, and typically in American history, in the context of Christianity, that there is an organized program. Now, let me make sure that I'm being clear here, because we don't want to get into like overthinking things. What I'm noting about the Spanish is that there is an organized program of evangelism that is sponsored by the government, that is a major cause here for Spanish colonization. So God, glory, and gold, per se. And so they're trying to evangelize. And I tend to use, General Patton. General Patton said, "Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way." And so the colonists, the colonizers all had different ways of dealing with this. So the Spanish, they wanted the Indians to follow them. They wanted the Indians to learn their language. They wanted the Indians to work for them. And so the French are going to view this in a different way. As far as that goes, the French who are settling in Canada, the Mississippi River, Louisiana. Now, like the Spanish, they're also Catholic. And this is, you could say basically slaves, would be a decent description of the encomienda. And so as far as that, the French, like the Spanish, are Catholic. Now, remember, synthesis is not necessarily a requirement anymore. But it's still something you can do if you want. Now, the French also sent priests because they are evangelizing like the Spanish, and they're also sending fur traders, okay? So their primary economic activity, rather than conquest and forced labor in the encomienda, the French are, trading furs. And so then, as you go here, let's see, we've got the Dutch, and the Dutch were Protestant. They're fur traders, like the French. So when you see here, the Dutch are fur trading like the French. They're Protestant, unlike the French and the Spanish. And then when we see here what the French and Spanish have in common, they're both sending few colonists. The Dutch, I'm putting some here. The Dutch are actually sending some families and that sort of thing. And now remember, you never know what's going to happen on the test, okay? You don't need to know really super specific things, but I think it's good to know that the Dutch were colonizing New Netherland, which is present-day New York. There is a lot, I'm seeing a lot of questions like, what are the odds this is going to be tested, that's going to be tested? What we need to remember is that there isn't... we don't actually know what's going to be tested, okay? So when it comes down to it, you really need to be ready for anything, and you need to think a little bit beyond the bare minimum. And so then you've got the English. Now, the English, are Protestant like the Dutch, and notice that there's a relationship here. So you'll get relationships and comparison and that sort of thing. The Dutch and the English were Protestant. Now, when I say there was no evangelism, I'm not saying that there wasn't a single English or Dutch missionary or something like that. But what I am saying is that colonizing is, evangelizing is not a central goal here, okay? So that's the thing, that the French and the Spanish have organized programs of evangelism sponsored by their governments, whereas the Dutch and the English, it's not as big of a deal to them. Okay, so the English are different. Now, I need to put here towns and farms. I don't know why this disappeared. I'll fix that in the version that gets sent to y'all, okay? So, Maddie, I'll fix that right after the session's over and send you a fresh copy. All right, so the thing is, I see that the Dutch and the English are Protestants. Now, also, the French and the Dutch, when you look here, the French and the Dutch both have this lead me mindset, that they're following the lead of the Indians, not necessarily because they're better people than the Spanish and the English, but they've got a money-making operation. When it comes down to it, some people make money on a completely up-and-up moral level. Some people have other labor systems, and other ways to make money that aren't so reputable. But the Dutch and the French, they're both trading, which means that when you trade with someone, you have to have an equal relationship. Now, you do want to know that the French had the best relationship with the Indians, okay? Because the French were concerned about business. They were also concerned about the souls of these Indians, and they would they would go to native villages. Their priest, instead of setting up missions like the Spanish, the French priest would go and they would live among the Indians. And so that's important here to note that the French and the Dutch are having more of a trade relationship that's based on reciprocal exchanges rather than dominance like the Spanish system. And one thing to think about, Bartolomé de las Casas was a Spanish critic. Okay, he was a priest, and he was a critic of Spanish colonization. You might want to make a little note about him. Bartolomé de las Casas. Okay, and he was critical of Spanish colonization. And one thing about his POV, if you ever run into De las Casas, what we have to remember is that he's, I'm sure it's not like he's lying or something like that, but when you read what he wrote, it's very, very vivid, very, a lot of historians say that, there's a little bit of exaggeration here. Perhaps he may not have seen all of this stuff. Some of this stuff is probably stories that he's heard, but his objective, his purpose is to get the Spanish to change colonial policy. So if your purpose is to get the Spanish to change colonial policy, then you are going to portray current colonial policy, the encomienda, in the worst possible light. Okay, yes, that basically, Kaylee, he is siding with the Indians. Now, why is this? Because when the Spanish are mistreating these Indians, it's making it harder for De las Casas to do his job, to evangelize. And so, this is the thing that when you look at the Spanish, different Spanish colonists have different goals. The priests are there to evangelize, and meanwhile, the conquistadors are not there to evangelize. They're there to profit. Okay, so as far as that, yes, he wanted to change the Spanish colonial policy. So make sure you understand that when you see a document, you want to look at it in terms of objective. Now, here's the thing that, as far as LEQs can be asked in a variety of different ways. Okay, so this is, okay, let me see what I can do here. Let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so that I can kind of work in front of you there. Make sure, follow me on Twitter. That was a fortuitous thing there. All right, now, Maddie, if there's a problem, let me know. Just send me a text if there's a problem seeing my screen. But what I want to do here is I want to demo how we would tackle an LEQ, comparing European colonizers. Okay, so as far as the LEQ format here, let's see. I did not put that in here, but let me go ahead and add that. All right. So as far as this goes, all right. So we're going to put up an LEQ prompt, and this LEQ prompt, remember, it can be comparison, causation, or continuity and change over time. Okay. So an APUSH LEQ prompt, and this is a comparison prompt. Now. One thing we want to note is that my rubric, if you type in APUSH LEQ rubric, or if you Google that, you're going to see my rubric for the APUSH LEQ. And we've also, I've also got that I can share with you in the resources. Okay, so the LEQs will all be scored on the same rubric, but they are going to, have different skills that they address. So as far as comparison here, the prompt could look something like this. Okay, and we'll do this. Let's see. So evaluate the extent to which the Spanish and French colonists were different from each other. Okay, so something like this: evaluate the extent to which Spanish and French colonists were different from each other. And so then, as far as what we would do here, I've got a pre-writing setup that I recommend. I've got a video. Well, I don't have a video on the APUSH LEQ, which I need to make one, but I've got, my writing clinic on my website if you want information about that. Now, What I do is I've got a pre-writing format for LEQs that I recommend to my students and my clients that tends to be helpful. Okay, so what I do here is I draw a box. And this box here, what we're doing, we're setting up because we want to do things, we want to show differences, but we also want to show similarities. So I want y'all to draw this box on your paper or bring it up on your computer screen or whatever you prefer to do. And so you've got a box for what is unique to the Spanish. You've got a box for what is unique to the French. And then you've got a box for what is common to both the Spanish and the French. And so as far as that goes, think about what we just discussed, and I'll go ahead and put the graphic organizer up here so that you can, so that you can look at the Spanish and the French colonists. Let me make sure here that everything is, let's see, look at the chat here. Let's see. So I think that everybody's looking at that. Okay. So as far as that goes, now an LEQ could be a 5-paragraph essay, but typically like you could do 5 paragraphs, but now your 5th paragraph would just need to be restating your thesis. But the thing is, let's work on getting this pre-written here. Okay. So you've got your boxes here, and I want you to make a couple of comparisons here. What was different about the Spanish and the French, and then what was the same. Now, what was common to both does not have to be especially profound. Okay. So take a moment and let's actually engage the chat here. Okay, so as far as that goes, if y'all can, what are y'all doing? Okay, so what are y'all doing? What are y'all coming up with? Okay, so what are y'all coming up with? Okay, so the Spain. Okay, oh, very good. Okay, so basically, if we want to go to something in common, they are both Catholic. Okay, so they are both Catholic and evangelizing, right? Okay, so they are both evangelizing Indians. Okay, so they are Catholic and they're evangelizing Indians. The Spanish, of course, they are conquering. And we can think about the word conquistadors. Okay, so conquistadors. And just making sure, so you've got the conquistadors, the conquerors, and then you've also got the missions and the encomienda. Okay, so missions, encomienda. Okay, and so as far as that goes, then we would go to the French, and we note that the French had a friendly. Now, this is one thing, the friendly French, right? Okay, so the French were friendly with Indians, fur trade, okay? And so then also, so they're friendly with the Indians, the fur trade. Now, there was also, some intentional intermarriage and stuff like that, but they have this friendly relationship. Now, they're Catholic, they're evangelizing Indians. Also, they had few colonists, okay? So if we look at the Spanish and the French, the way we contrast them with the English and the Dutch is that they sent less colonists than the English and the Dutch. And so we see that, and then we see, let's see here. Okay, so then that's what we've got there. Now, we've got a few things here. Now, we could mention, Bartolomé de las Casas. Now, anything go ahead and put it here. Okay, so Bartolomé de las Casas. So you could mention him, and that would be a very strong source to mention. We could also mention Jesuits. Okay, Jesuits lived among natives. Okay, they lived among natives, learned languages. Okay, so whereas the Spanish did not learn the native language. They tried to get the natives to learn the Spanish language. And so what I've done here is I've set up an LEQ that even brings out some of that, complex understanding. Okay, so this is the type of pre-writing setup I recommend for any LEQ, and I'll show y'all on other broadcasts how to do this for causation and continuity and change over time as well. But make sure that you are presenting arguments and also mentioning specific evidence and stuff like that, okay? And now, if somebody wanted to go even beyond that, you could perhaps get that complex understanding point by going the synthesis route. You know, if your teacher's a fan of synthesis and has taught that, you could write a paragraph about the Dutch and the English. But I typically think that the best way to get complex understanding on the LEQ is to go here. Okay, is to do the similarities. Okay, so let me show you as far as this goes. Let's see. Maddie, I might need a little bit of advice here. Let's see. Okay, no, actually, okay, so stop sharing. Okay, I think that I'm good there. Okay, so we've stopped sharing the screen, and what I want to share is my rubric. So we're going to take a look at the APUSH LEQ rubric. And so as far as that goes, now contextualization, we could say something here about the, contextualization, you bring in things that are going to, like, good background information. Now, what is something that we've already talked about that we've talked about in this session, that could be good contextualization for an essay about French and Spanish colonization? Excellent, Daniel. That the Columbian exchange. Now, De las Casas could be used. What you could do, yes, in Caroline, the current pope is the first Jesuit ever to be elected pope. So that's good to know. You could bring in the triangular trade. You could bring in the Columbian exchange. You could, write about now De las Casas. I might be more prone to use him as like outside information or something like that. But yes, okay, now, yes, Tien, we've just been talking about competing European powers. Hernan Cortez would be great. He'd be a good piece of evidence. So excellent. So contextualization, which doesn't have to be in the first paragraph, but the readers generally expect it to be in the first paragraph. And so since the reader is expecting contextualization to be in the first paragraph, then you want to make sure to that. Now, yeah, you could possibly go into the age of exploration or something like that. So there's definitely more than one way to skin a cat. Yes, contextualization, I think the Columbian exchange and noting like the discovery of the New World and remembering to put in some details. So, that they exchange different things here, mention some of the things like potatoes and tomatoes and horses and cattle and diseases. Very good. The 3 Gs, very good. Okay, so let's move on from that, and then you would go into your thesis, okay? So for writing a thesis, now here's what I love about my pre-writing format, okay? Because the way that this pre-writing format works, planning more quickly. Okay, so here's the thing. If we talk about planning, now this is an investment, okay? What you want to think about is pre-writing is an investment. And to invest something, I've got to be willing to give up something, okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give up a little time, but I'm going to make it more efficient here. Okay, so as far as this, specific tribes, just depending, but you're not really required to know like specific stuff. Now, as far as that goes, let's go ahead and share my screen again, and I'll construct a thesis for you, okay? So let's go ahead and let me show you. Somebody asked, how can we make this efficient, okay? So as far as this goes, what I would do here is, in order to do a thesis for this prompt, I've got everything there, okay, that I've got all of this stuff here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I would frame a thesis using what I've got here, okay? All right, so as far as this goes, evaluate the extent to which the Spanish and French colonists were different from each other. And let me go ahead and put that there so we can see, we all want to see. We want to make sure that when we're writing our thesis that we're looking at the prompt. We don't want to write the thesis without looking at the prompt, okay? So let's make sure that the prompt is always in front of us when we're doing this. So evaluate the extent to which the Spanish and French colonists were different from each other, okay? And so what I'm going to note here is, and hydrate, remember, especially if you're doing 9 live webinars over 2 weeks, all right? So the Spanish and the French. So what I would note here, I could say here, although the Spanish and the French were both Catholic and evangelized evangelized Indians. Now, remember, there is a common like misconception that the word like Indian is offensive. In the academic community, it's kind of like if you use black or African American, either one of them can be used in academic writing. And it's not offensive to use one rather than the other. So if somebody uses the word Native American or uses the word American Indians or natives or Indians, nobody's going to be offended by that. If you read some scholarly works, you're going to find these words in there. So I just want to make that clear that you're not causing any offense in academic communities if you use the word Indian. So I want to make sure people understand that that's kind of a misconception, in historical writing. So all those, the Spanish and the French were both Catholic and evangelized Indians. The Spanish, the Spanish sought to make money from Indian treasure and labor, while the French engaged in had friendlier relations because of the fur trade. Okay. And so what I've done here now, what's really necessary here in order to get a point for the thesis, that this is really, I'm setting up complex understanding here. Okay. So the thing is, this is a great thesis. This is complex understanding. Okay. So that is the final point in the APUSH LEQ rubric. Okay, so if I want a complex understanding thesis, I want to make sure that I do similarities and differences. Okay, so my thesis should be setting up an essay that is going to get into similarities and differences. Okay, so similarities and differences, that's what we're taking as far as complex understanding if you're trying to get to that point. Now, as far as this goes, though, we could do a differences only. Okay, so this is basically not complex. Okay, so adequate. Okay, so if we're just trying to get that point, we could just note here that a key difference between the Spanish and the French. Okay, now note here, I'm not using for a thesis. Okay, so basically differences only, not complex. Okay, you're not trying to get the complex point, you're just trying to get in there and get the thesis point and make your general arguments here. So this would be an adequate thesis. Now note, I'm not going to mention Bartolome de las Casas or the Encomienda. I'm previewing my points, not my evidence. I'm presenting a line of reasoning. So basically what I would do here is I would write a paragraph about the Spanish, then I would write a paragraph about the French. Now if I'm doing complex understanding, then these are my body paragraphs. So by doing this pre-writing format, somebody's asking me, how can I do this efficiently and quickly? That this is saving you time, because this is setting up your thesis statement and also setting up your body paragraphs. And so that's going to help you in terms of comparing. And when somebody's like, oh, all I've got to know is, somebody said earlier, oh, all I've got to know is that they were different. Good luck with that. Okay, that's not going to be sufficient for you to present evidence, because on the LEQ you are going to have to present specific evidence in order to get those evidence points. So just to make sure that we know that that we're clear on that, that if we go in into the APUSH DBQ rubric, okay. And so as far as that goes, yes, and some of y'all have like thesis formats that your teachers have shared with you, and that's awesome. So, first paragraph, contextualization and thesis. Now, evidence and support for argument. For the first point, you need like 2 examples, and they can be anywhere. They can be 2 examples for the Spanish. Now, remember, it can't just be drive-by. You can't just say, Bartolome de las Casas, he was a priest. That's not going to get you there. What you'd have to note here is that Bartolome de las Casas, was a priest who, he wrote against the Spanish encomienda in an effort to change Spanish colonial policy. All right. Now, and as far as that, you don't want to just read, you do want to use the language of the prompt in some way as well. Thank you so much. Glad y'all are helping each other in addition to getting help from me. Now, the second evidence point, you are supporting an argument. So the evidence is being used, like for the first evidence point, it just has to be relevant to the prompt. For the second evidence point, the evidence needs to support the argument, and you need, so it needs to support the argument also. There is kind of unofficially, I think, on a lot of these essays, especially on more accessible topics, there's going to be a greater volume requirement. So if you're trying to get the evidence and support for argument point, I would urge you to have 2 pieces of evidence to support each point. All right. And so as far as that goes, then finally, the historical reasoning. If you're comparing, this should be a pretty easy point to get, because if you're comparing the French and the Spanish, then you're going to get that. Complex understanding, that's what the best way to get that on the LEQ if it's comparison is to do the similarities and differences. Okay, that's the thing that's going to get you complex understanding on the LEQ. Now, finally, I want to just take a quick look. Now, there are all kinds of videos about this, about the 13 colonies. This is something that y'all should be, pretty well versed on. So I'm just going to bring it to your attention that we want to, just like we've compared and contrasted the European colonizers, we also want to compare and contrast the 13 colonies, okay? And knowing a few key people, now, you don't have to know the names of all 13 colonies, okay? And I probably went a little extra with the southern colonies, with me being from the South, though. But the main thing here is you want to see, like, how is New England different, okay? John Winthrop, very good. And, of course, Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson, and overcoming the whole myth. You know how we were in elementary school and they taught us that the Puritans, came to the Puritans went to the, New England for religious freedom. Not so much, okay? So as far as that goes, New England is about commerce, okay? And not in the sense that, you're going for commerce and then for religious freedom, whereas the middle colonies and the southern colonies are engaged in agriculture. And so you've got commerce, fishing, shipbuilding, timber, and distilling rum versus crops. Now, what we need to know as well is distinguishing staple crops in the middle colonies, wheat and corn, versus cash crops in the southern colonies, okay? Now, the other thing here is periodization. When we think about periodization, we need to remember that tobacco, rice, indigo, these are colonial cash crops. Cotton is not a cash crop until the antebellum period, okay? New England engaged in commerce. They didn't engage in, like, agricultural production beyond subsistence, okay? So, basically there were farmers in New England, but they're farming more for subsistence than they are to raise crops for export, okay? And so stuff like that. All right, so tobacco due to John Rolfe, not John Smith. But yes, John Rolfe was Pocahontas's husband, and I've got videos on New England and on the southern colonies that you're welcome to look at as well. But yes, the middle colonies being the breadbasket. Yes, Kaylee, what we need to know is that the cotton gin had not been invented yet. So if you get a multiple choice question about, cash crops in colonial America or the southern colonies, they might try to put a distractor on there that brings up cotton, and you need to know that cotton agriculture is not coming around until the antebellum period. The antebellum period is 1820 to 1860, the period between the Missouri Compromise and the Civil War. But yes, tobacco is your big colonial cash crop. And so then remember the approach to religion, okay? Whereas in New England, they tend to be very fanatical, like they're very, very religious. That is the reason for this. And that's where even Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson are being kicked out of there. The middle colonies tend to be tolerant. William Penn and the Quakers. You might want to know about the Quakers and how the Quakers tended to be religiously tolerant. And in the southern colonies, which, because of the Great Awakenings, and the legacy of that, the South is the most religious part of the country today, but during the time of the colonies, not so much. Okay, so as far as that, Bill of Rights Institute has given me my 5-minute warning, so let me take a look at some of these questions here. Okay, should the thesis be one sentence? The thesis may be one sentence or 2 sentences. Now, if a 2-sentence thesis, they need to be concurrent sentences. They need to be one right after the other. And it needs to be clear that this is a two-pronged thesis. So it's not like I'm going to be able to get a sentence here and pair it with a sentence a couple sentences later. It has to be together, okay? And so let's see. Let's see. When you have a question like that, similarities and differences, or one want to pick one topic, similarities. I'm not sure what that means there. Okay. To what extent? Okay. So do we need to specifically answer to what extent? Now, when it comes down to it, if you show the similarities and differences, you have answered to what extent. Okay. So when we think about evaluate the extent to which, what we're doing is now it is good if you go into like, okay, they were a lot different or they really weren't that different. Okay. So if you're going for a complex essay, you might note that there were major differences in the French and the Spanish colonies or something like that. But at the same time, as long as you are noting that they were similar in these ways and they were different in these ways, then there you go. Now, then remember that, you know, a bare minimum thesis, as long as it is noting similarities or differences, you should be fine there. Okay, so let's see. Now, a thesis. Ryan, I'm a big fan of the thesis more for like the DBQ, okay? The DBQs, I like to put the documents into three groups, and I like to go, this is paragraph 1, this is paragraph 2, this is paragraph 3. Now, for an LEQ, I wouldn't necessarily go the thesis route because it's more about take this and compare it to this. And so it kind of, in a way, I guess, if you're going for complex understanding, you've got the thesis in the sense that here's what defines the Spanish, here's what defines the French, and here is what defines, what defines both. Okay, so that is, going along with three things. But if you're not going for complex understanding, you can really write, an introductory paragraph, you write two body paragraphs, and then you can go from, you can write, basically restate your thesis, okay? As far as that, now, are we going to go over content or mostly test strategies? This is really about both. What you have to remember about the APUSH exam is it's not just a content test. You can know all kinds of stuff, but if you don't know how to take the test or write the essays, then that could be an issue. So what I'm going to do here on these webinars is I'm going to be reviewing content, but there's always going to be some kind of application. Melissa, I'm glad you're finding it helpful. So I'm trying to walk a line between putting good content in front of you and then showing you how to use that, because I think that a lot of students, what they struggle with is how to put that together. And so as far as that goes, and of course I've got content information in my videos too. The Bill of Rights Institute has their stuff as well. Remember Crash Course. Now, of course, POV me, because I kind of compete with Crash Course. Crash Course is not, they don't have the obligation to prepare you for an exam. Like the point of those videos is exclusively for views and ad revenue. Whereas my videos, do I want views and revenue? Yes, I do want views and revenue. Okay, so when I recommend my channel, you've got to keep that in mind. But you also have to remember that if you're looking at my videos, Joe's videos, Joe's Productions, we teach this course and we're making these videos for the purpose of preparing people. So as far as that stuff there. All right. And so, okay, thank you. Marty, I'm so glad that I'm able to help teachers as well. Okay, so as far as that goes, ladies and gentlemen, I think that this is coming to a close, and I'm going to turn it back over to Maddie, who will, who may have a couple quick remarks. But remember that she's going to be, sending some stuff out to you, and the Bill of Rights Institute has plenty of stuff there. Also, if you perhaps, want to visit, and this is on our webinar page, but tomrichey.net/APUSH, you're already on the Bill of Rights email list. That'll put you on the email list for other broadcasts that I'll be doing next week in addition to these. Okay, so as far as that goes, Maddie, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. That was super helpful. So a lot of you guys have been asking about the study guide. So that was available blank for you to access and to fill out and help you during the webinar. Now tomorrow in the email, we're going to be providing you with some extra resources, as well as some of the resources that Tom has so graciously provided and mentioned that will be included in that email. So make sure that you're checking your emails, and also we are going to have another webinar on the second period tomorrow night at 6:30 Eastern Time, so the same exact time as tonight. We're just going to go ahead and move on through history, and it'll be the same exact format. So if you have any questions, you can email me. My email is mhoward@billofrightsinstitute.com or billofrightsinstitute.org. I'm writing it out now. .org.